hope everybody is well. Obviously, just finishing up recruiting this morning, which is what I'd call the late signing day. I think the first signing day is the signing day, and this is the late signing day rather than calling it the early signing day and signing day. Really proud of the staff and what we've been able to do throughout this entire process. Obviously, we're getting ready to kind of turn the page and start on the next classes, as well as winter workouts and spring ball and summer workouts. Obviously, we've got a lot of work to do, a lot of planning that's gone into all these things. But overall, I would like to thank the staff for all the hard work that they put into this, specifically the recruiting staff as well as the coaches. The recruiting staff probably doesn't get as much love. Everybody's aware of the coaches, but the recruiting staff off the field have done a phenomenal job. One of our better classes. I think a big part of that is I do think it was a strong year in the state of Pennsylvania and a strong year in the region, which helps. That always helps. Obviously, it's the hard work of the staff, but if it's not a strong year in the state or a strong year in the region, that can make it challenging as well. So kind of the stars have to align a little bit for this to happen as well. But I am really proud of all the hard work that everybody put in. And look forward to answering you guys' questions, but really appreciate everybody being on and very pleased with the class overall. Obviously, we still got some work to do, but we truly appreciate everybody getting on to cover Penn State football. Open up to questions.
We'll start with Rich Starcella from the Reading Eagle, and then we'll go to Audrey Snyder.
Rich is muted, guys.
It's our first day with Zoom. Greg's working on it.
Sorry, guys. Give us a second. We're not in the stadium where we normally are. We're in my office, so some things are a little bit different. I apologize. Trying to get Rich unmuted.
Oh, Rich. Okay, there it is. Yep.
Sorry about that, Rich.
No problem. James, in light of the news yesterday, in a related matter, where do you think minority hiring is in college football? What do you think needs to be done in college football, and how can you be an instrument in doing that?
Yeah, so when you first started, I was like the news yesterday. I wasn't sure where we were going, if we're talking recruiting, college football, but yes. Yeah, obviously the thing that I want to do is to set a really good example, right? And the success that we have here hopefully will open more opportunities for guys around the country as well as guys on my staff. I think that's the first thing that we can do. But I think the other thing is, when I have the opportunity to be able to introduce coaches to athletic directors and commissioners, and when I have the opportunity to vouch for people, whether it's with search firms or whatever it may be, I have a responsibility with that. I'm pretty proud if you think of the guys that have left here and have gone on to be head coaches. Obviously, one of those guys is Charles Huff, that was with me at both Vanderbilt as well as Penn State. Actually just talked to Charles, maybe a day or two ago. He has an opening on his staff, so I was trying to help him with that. But I think that's really important. And I think, being willing to have these conversations and be willing to answer these questions. From a reality standpoint, the fact that it's 2022 and we're still kind of having these discussions and there hasn't been a whole lot of progress is somewhat crazy. If you really look at from a historical perspective, the number of coaches of color in college football and in the NFL, is probably concerning, and I think the other thing is, when you see some of the things that are going on behind the scenes, as we all witnessed yesterday, that's concerning as well. I think there's been obviously some policies and some plans to try to help with that. But at the end of the day, those things haven't had a whole lot of have not made much of an impact. So at the end of the day, I think we really got to get down to the core issues and why is it a problem in the first place? This is something that we probably could spend a whole press conference talking on, Rich. But what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to do the very best job that I can at Penn State, and that's not just winning games and not graduating our players, but also representing the university the right way, hopefully setting an example for others, and hopefully opening a few doors that deserve to be opened. David Shaw is a good friend of mine. We talk about these things a lot. I think guys like David and others, hopefully including myself, can hopefully be a part of the change that needs to happen.
Audrey Snyder and then Mark Brennan.
Hey James, happy birthday.
Thanks, Audrey. Appreciate it.
Different note, over the weekend, Bryce Mostella had made some allegations against you and against the program. What is your response to that? And is he still part of the team?
Yeah, as you can imagine, when things like this happen, we're not really going to have a response. We can't have a response. It's not the appropriate setting to do that. And I obviously in this setting, I don't want to get into a whole lot of specifics. The one thing I would say is, he's not currently enrolled, so you can't really be a part of a team unless you're enrolled in classes. But obviously our focus is on all of our student athletes, in the entire athletic department and specifically football, is to make sure that our guys are healthy and safe. But that's really what I can say at this point.
Mark Brennan and then Nate Bauer.
Hey, James, thanks for your time today.
Hey, Mark, you too.
Hey, on the recruiting front, can you talk about how your focus has had to change in January over the last few years from finishing up a current class to, now having multiple junior days, the portal, all of those things? It seems like a completely different animal now than maybe it once was.
Yeah, and I'd probably say the biggest thing is college football has changed dramatically in the last 5 years and specifically to probably the last 2 years. And I think it's a really good example of, you're going to need to be flexible as a football program. You're going to need to be flexible as an athletic department and as a university, to make sure that you are positioning your program and your school in the best position you can to take advantage of these rules. I think a really good example is our spring semester starts earlier than most. And when guys are looking to get into the transfer portal and be somewhere for spring ball, we can't use the normal admissions process that's always existed to get a guy in. There's going to have to be some flexibility. There was a fairly prominent school, that just got some guys, on their campus and in class, and they have a similar academic schedule that we have, and they were able to get guys into school, So I just think it's something that not only the NCAA and the Big Ten has to look at, but all these different institutions have to look at as well and say, okay, these are the new rules. These are the new realities, and are we willing, and what do we need to do to position our programs and our school in the best light to take advantage of these things? And I think flexibility is probably as important as it's ever been. So I think that's one example of many, but I think I've said to you guys before, it's interesting. I think a lot of these changes that we've made has made the argument for staffs to get bigger rather than smaller. because there's just too many things that are going on at the same time. Taking care of your current roster, recruiting high school student athletes, looking at the transfer portal and the possibility of getting some transfers from other universities and schools. I mean, there's some programs that have a complete recruiting department for high school athletes and then have a separate recruiting department strictly for the transfer portal. They're hiring former pro player personnel people from the NFL and creating a whole department for the transfer portal. So I think it's just something that we have to understand. College football has changed dramatically in the last, obviously even before I got here, but it's changed even more over the last 5 years. And you have to be bold and you have to be aggressive and you have to be flexible. And there has to be a sense of urgency across the board to change and change fast.
Nate Bauer, then John Sauber.
Hey, James, how are you?
Good, Nate. How are you?
Good. Hey, how close to solidified do you feel like the roster is right now? And is there movement left for you in terms of what you're looking for through the transfer portal?
Yeah, there's a little wiggle room. I don't know if the word solidified and roster is ever going to be, that again, under the current model. But for us, I think it's really important that, we're doing a great job with our, end of the fall meetings with our players and making sure they have a really good understanding of where they're at. Obviously, I'll do that as well, during the spring. But I do think there's going to be, across, the country in college football, there's going to be moving parts. And that's why I don't know if we can continue in the same hard cap numbers and signing numbers in terms of whether it's the hard cap or whether it's initials. We're using a model that was built for college football 20 years ago, and that's really no longer the model. It's changed dramatically. So I think not only does there need to be flexibility on these college campuses, but there needs to be flexibility, at the Big Ten and NCAA level as well, to make sure that we're putting our programs in the best position to respond, when change happens.
John Sauber, then Ben Jones.
Hey, James, how are you?
Good, John. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing good, thanks. So with the two additions at quarterback earlier in January, are you still committed to having Sean Clifford as your starter this year, or do you plan on opening that up a bit more to the other guys on the roster?
Yeah, Sean's our returning starter. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, there's competition at every position. And obviously it's more challenging, at any position to unseat a returning starter who's been doing it for a couple years. But there's competition across the board at every single position, and you rebuild your team every single year. And there'll be competition at every single position, including the quarterback position.
Ben Jones, then Donnie Collins.
Hey, James, how's it going?
Good, Ben. How are you, man?
Good. I got you a broad, open-ended question for your birthday. We've talked about the infrastructure changes around the program. We've talked about the philosophical changes around the program that you'd like to see. What do you think you have to get better at, and what do you think you've changed at over the last 3 years?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes hand in hand. I think I'm a guy that likes the structure and I like the consistency that we've been able to have. I'd prefer not to have the changes that we've had, but you better embrace them. I think that's something that not only am I preaching to the administration and the fans and when I answer your guys' questions, but I'm also talking to myself about that as well. Whether you totally agree with the transfer portal or whether you totally agree with NIL or whether you totally agree with these things, the reality is you have to embrace them. I have to embrace them. And then once I've embraced them, I got to do a great job of educating and explaining to all the people that have a hand in Penn State football, whether it's internal to Lash building or outside of it, that they understand what we're competing against currently. I think we've made, some dramatic changes. Obviously, COVID taught us a lot, but I've been able to lean heavily on guys like Dwight Galt and Brent Pry for a very long time. I think me and Coach Galt have been together, I think, on and off for like 21 years. Brent Pry, we've worked together for 12 years. So, there's change, and embracing that change and kind of be excited about, what comes with that. So I think that's probably the biggest thing for me and the program in college football right now is embracing change. And again, I'm preaching to myself on that as much as anything. And then I think it's also having an awareness of what are the core beliefs and values that should never change. That these are the things that have allowed us to be successful at Vanderbilt. These are the things that allowed us to come to Penn State and be successful at Penn State. And what's the next step? What's the next step? And I think that's the biggest thing that I've talked to you guys about that I think we're closer to achieving than ever is the alignment. With the board and all the way down to the head football coach. And I think that's really the next step for us so that we can consistently do what the fans and the alumni and the lettermen want us to do.
Donnie Collins and then Neil Rudell.
Happy birthday, James.
Hey, Donnie. Appreciate it, man.
Tyrece Mills signed today. I think the easy thing to do was compare him to Brisker and Tig Brown because of where he came from. But what do you see from him that kind of is similar to them, but maybe a little bit different in regards to what you're looking for at safety?
Yeah, we've had a lot of success, obviously, with that position specifically, when it comes to Lackawanna Junior College and what that staff has done over there with Coach Duda and Coach Reese and Coach Pardini. I think those things have been helpful, hopefully, to both of our programs. There's no doubt about that. So I think, with Tyrece, we saw some similar traits, right? You're talking about a guy from the region. He's from Philadelphia Northeast High School that has been able to go to Lackawanna and continue on that path of great safeties that have decided to come to Penn State. Now, one of the things that's great, that's a little bit different is, whether you're at Penn State or whether you're at Lackawanna Junior College, that COVID year still has the same impact. So you're talking about getting a junior college guy that has 3 years of eligibility here, which is tremendous value in that. It's kind of a hybrid high school, junior college type player. But I think the biggest thing is his physicality. You're talking about a guy that I think can play really, in my mind, how I look at it, any three of the safety spots, which is the two deep safeties, but also that field backer slash safety player that we'd like to play with. I think he has a chance to play all three of those spots for us. I think his biggest strength is coming downhill and supporting a run like Marcus Allen did as well. But he also has the athleticism and ball skills to make some plays in those areas as well. So we're excited to get him on campus. I wish he was in a situation like JB Nelson that was able to be here, for spring ball. He's not, but we're excited about his potential, excited about his future. And again, I think the 3 years of eligibility is significant. Hopefully we can, get him involved in special teams and get him on the rotation in the back end and just let it build and grow from there from a confidence standpoint. I don't know about you guys, but I'm just enjoying watching Tyler Donahue get his rear end beat right now, trying to manage this at the same time. It's awesome. So I don't know if you guys are having the opportunity to enjoy this the way I am. I got 125 of them, Tyler. You got one. Let's go.
We will go Neil Rudell and then Corey Geiger.
Hey, James, you and Punksy Phil.
That's exactly. I'm actually talking about going up there a few times and being a part of that, but yeah, obviously Punksy Phil's the man.
Curious, how much do you think last year set your timetable back of where you expect the program to be, or are you closer than maybe the record showed last year?
Yeah, I think you would. I don't want to speak for you, and I think most people would say, obviously, we were really close last year. We were very, very close. At one point ranked number 4 in the country, and doing some really good things. But I think it's also a great example where depth is so important, where development is so important. Because injuries are going to play a factor in college football across the board. So depth is important. Some things, going your way are important as well. And then obviously continuing to build, from an offensive, defense, and special teams scheme perspective, all of it. But it's what we do on the field that's important, but it's also all the things that we do off the field that we're willing to compete in everything year round, which you guys have heard me say for 8 years. We have got to be willing to compete year round, because all the little losses that you have throughout the entire calendar year, those add up. All the wins that you have throughout the calendar year, they add up. And we have to be willing to do those things in all areas year round for us to have the type of success that we want to have consistently. I think obviously we've been able to show in our time here what we're able to do, winning a Big Ten championship before anybody expected us to win a Big Ten championship, having a record of success and consistency in 3 New Year's 6 bowl games, I think in 4 years, which I don't know if it happened before here in the Big Ten era. So I think we've shown what we are able to do. We got to get back to that. There's no doubt about it. But we also got to make sure that we're doing all the things that we talk about year round consistently to allow us to do it at a level where, Neil, you expect it, and the fans and everybody else do as well. And I'm very aware of that, of what the expectations are. That's why we came here. We embrace the extremely high expectations that we have here at Penn State. But I want to make sure that we're doing all the things necessary to compete with the teams that we're compared to year round.
Corey Geiger and then Mike Portman.
James, with regards to Big Ten alignment, what would you like to see? What would be best for Penn State? 2 divisions, 1 division, 8 games. Do you know what if you could pick your 3 crossover opponents? Fans would like to see probably Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, but would that even be best for Penn State?
Yeah, I think it's what you have to look at, in my mind, is you have to look at not just what's best for Penn State, what's in the best interest of the Big Ten. I would say that some of the decisions that we have made from a scheduling perspective were not in the best interest in the Big Ten. The way the alignment was made has not been in the best interest of the Big Ten. History shows that. If you look at, whether it's the BCS or you look at the college football playoff, some of the decisions that we have made and the structure that we have in terms of all the way back to the decision of playing 9 conference games when other conferences decide to stay at 8. You'd make the argument from a historical perspective, they have not been in the best interest of the Big Ten. Right now, if you look at the way the conference is divided, which is very different, even from, I think, when Billy was here, with the legends and the leaders, is different. And not only is I think that probably not in the best interest of some of the individual institutions, it's also not in the best interest of the Big Ten. And I think all the data would support that. One of the things I think has been said from time to time is, well, it all balances out over time. Again, the history and the data doesn't show that. So I think it's something that I think, the commissioner, Kevin Warren, and I think the Big Ten is probably more open to discussing than ever before. But I think those are the things, Corey, that need to be discussed at that level big picture. And I think that's one of the things I think you have to be careful of, Corey. And we try to do this at the same thing at the national level with the American Football Coaches Association, that I think you have to be careful when you're only making decisions based on what's best for your institution. You never get anything done that way, because everybody's just doing what's in their best interest. And you really have to say, okay, what's in the best interest of the Big Ten? And I think if you do that more times than not, it's going to be the right thing for the individual institutions as well, more times than not. One thing I'd like to add, I'm sorry, Chris, before we move on here, is just so you guys know, we can now announce officially Vega Ioane is signed in our class as well. A 6'4", 330 offensive lineman out of Graham, Washington, Graham Capucin High School, and Coach Curl out there. Really excited as a young man that came on campus on an official visit with his mom, brother, and sister. He's one of 9 children. He's the youngest of 9 children. You're talking about a guy that was part of a state championship team this year as well. A guy that we think is going to physically have the opportunity to come in and compete early on in his career. But talking about another high-level offensive lineman that played for a really, really good high school. And obviously from an academic perspective too, is a great fit for Penn State. So he chose to go all the way across the country and come to Penn State. And we wanted to make sure that once he announced publicly that we would announce him on here as well, and make sure that you guys were aware of that as soon as possible. So thanks, Chris.
No problem. Mike Portman and then Mike Gross.
Yeah, speaking of Mike Gross and Neil and Richie, welcome to the Over 50 Club, James.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Literally, I remember, I think when I was at Vanderbilt, I was like one of the youngest coaches in college football and major college football. And I don't know what happened, but that's not the case anymore. It's changed. But yeah, I'm at 50. I don't know how I feel about that yet, Mike. Maybe you and Neil and the guys have some advice for me. But I'm not sure how I feel about that.
50 is the new 40.
Poindexter had a pretty good line this morning when we were in here early getting coffee. Poindexter goes, "It beats the alternative." So I'll take that.
There you go. Hey, you're certainly aware of what Grambling and what Ohio State recently did in Texas. Is Penn State where it needs to be with NIL institutionally? And what can be done there? And then kind of a parallel question. If you've met with Neely, have you told her what your 1 or 2 top priorities are?
Yeah, so with name, image, and likeness, this is something that we've been pushing on and talking about for 2 years. In the football building, this was brought up 2 years ago, that we needed to have a plan and be aggressive and be bold with this area. Compared to the programs that you have mentioned, we're not there yet. I do think we have an unbelievable opportunity at Penn State with our alumni base and our brand and our national reputation. I think we have tremendous opportunities, with the education, that our young men get and the foundation that our men and women leave Penn State with, and the number of really, really successful alumni that we have. We have to take advantage of that, and we have to be bold, and we have to be aggressive, and we have to embrace it. I'd love to see us being on the front end and being the leader nationally in these areas, but we're not there yet. That's clear, and that's obvious. We have some work to do. But yeah, I'd love to see us like the schools that you mentioned. That we are bold and aggressive in these areas and flexible. And when these new rules are put in place, we have to move, and we have to move quickly. There's no doubt about it. When it comes to conversations with our new president, I think the first thing is, our new president has been very, very respectful of President Barron and make sure that transition is smooth. And obviously we have a ton of respect for Coach Barron and what he's been able to do in our time. We came pretty much together to Penn State. So I haven't had a sit down conversation with our new president yet. We've had some conversations, but not, in the details that you're talking about. I know that's going to happen, but has not happened yet. So I hope that answers both of your questions.
For the record, Brett McMurphy, who's not on this call, just tweeted you're the 65th youngest head coach in FBS. So
is that something to brag about? 60?
I don't think so. I'm just
Brett McMurphy. I mean, how old is he? Where does he rank in age in the writers?
On that note, we'll go to Mike Gross and then Bob Flounders.
We're only taking questions from people 50 years old.
Just got to say that on that note, we go to Mike Gross. Exactly. Yeah, I'm the 65th oldest sports writer in Pennsylvania, I guess. James, a couple things that you've talked about in this recently and in this press conference that I want to try to put a finer point on. Would you like to some schools have done the NIL stuff, kind of farmed it out to to specific people who do that. Would you like to have Penn State have its own sort of department of that, I guess? And the other thing is with the portal and the recruiting stuff, you talked about schools that now have completely separate personnel that do transfer portal and recruiting. Would you like to have that specific change?
Yeah, so I guess to answer your question, I think we have to be bold and aggressive. I think we have to sit here and say, okay, here's a rule that's coming, that's going to be a change. And how are we going to take advantage of that rule under the Penn State umbrella that everybody is comfortable with and have thorough discussions about it? And then the same thing under the state rules and laws. And then once we do that, which we should be able to do very quickly, then we need to move, and we need to be one of the leaders in college football. We need to be one of the leaders in college athletics, and put some things out there that people can be excited about and that people can get behind, and that put our student athletes in the best position and put our individual teams in the best position to be successful and compete year round. We have to be bold and aggressive. And then it's the same thing you're talking about. When it comes to name, image, and likeness, again, you have to be bold and aggressive. Mike, the way I would just make the argument, college football is so competitive that there is not an area that you can say, well, we're not going to compete in that area. Yeah, you have to be willing to compete in it all. And I think that's the difference. You have to be willing to compete in it all. And again, these are things, guys, that you've been hearing me talk about all the way back to when I first got here. And I remember bringing up facilities, and some of the media on this call looked at me like I had three heads. You got to be willing to compete in all of it year round. And I think, that's what the expectation is. And I know we're excited about doing it.
Bob Flounders, and then we'll wrap it up with Tyler Donahue.
Hi, James. Happy birthday.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it, buddy.
Feel free to use this to your advantage moving forward. Dave Jones turns 65 in April. If you want to use that at any time, use that to your advantage.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I wanted to.
Somebody tweet that to Dave Jones.
I know I'm going to hear about it. I wanted to just go back to the second half of last season and not, belabor the obvious, but your running game had its share of struggles. But I thought there were times, James, during the second half of the season after games where I don't know if you were frustrated, but you said you weren't really satisfied maybe with the commitment to the run game in the game, and maybe that could actually help take some pressure off some other areas of your offense. Is that accurate, number one? And is that a kind of a commitment to be more committed to the running game maybe in 2022, especially with the two talented runners that you're bringing in that enrolled in January?
Yes, I think there's no doubt about it. We have to be able to throw to win games. We have got to be able to run to win games. And there's going to be games where the run needs to be the emphasis. If you're playing a team and they're dropping 8, I think you saw it in the second half of the Chiefs game. You know, if they're going to drop 8, that makes throwing the ball more challenging, and you got to be able to run. I remember in the Cotton Bowl game, you know, sitting there and saying we got an opportunity right now to run the ball, you know, and committing to that during the game, making that shift and running for a bunch of yards. I think we rushed for over 300 yards. I think, you know, Journey rushed for 250. You know, so it's all of it. And we're going to be games where we're going to need to run the ball to win. There's going to be games where we need to throw the ball to win. And we have to have the ability to do that throughout a season and throughout games. And yeah, I think if you look at the bowl game, we got away from the run, and we should have run the ball more. We were having success doing it, and we should have done that. That's part of my responsibility as well in the off-season studies. And making sure that we're committed to doing that during spring ball, that we're committed to doing that during the summer, and that we're committed to doing that during the year. And I think that's also my job, you know, during games as well. You know, I'd have conversations with Brent Pry during the game where I felt like we need to be more aggressive or call coverage or whatever it may be. And the same thing on offense. You know, we need to push the ball down the field here and take a shot. You know, we need to run the ball more. I think that's where I can help. You know, as the head coach. So yeah, you know, there's a lot of things that you look back after games, whether it's the NFL or whether it's college or high school, you look back after games and you say, you know, we weren't as good in this area. We need to be better in this area after a game, and you learn from that and you try to adjust during the season. There's things you look back at the end of the season and say, okay, you know, here's a strength, here's a weakness. We need to work hard on getting this weakness fixed and resolved. And then I think there's also a little bit, you know, with the run game where you have to be patient. You know, you have to be patient with it, you know, throwing the ball and explosive plays and the excitement, you know, that comes with the way college football has really evolved, as well as the NFL. If you're not careful, you become too throw heavy. And I just want to make sure that we have the ability to do both. And that's through development of our players. That's through recruiting. That's through scheme. That's through fundamentals. That's through all of it. And that will be an emphasis this spring. That will be an emphasis this summer and next season as well.
We'll wrap it up with Tyler Donahue and Olivia.
It's Olive, Chris, but I
Olive, my bad.
Olivia, I think, was the most popular girl's name in 2021, so that's fine. James, happy birthday. I want to ask about two players that are new to your roster, one that's already on the roster, one that you just announced to us. Vega, how did that come together in such a short time period, and what does that commitment and signing, I guess, show trust reciprocated on both sides in a short period? And then Mitchell Tinsley put up crazy numbers last year at Western Kentucky. He's now on campus with you. What stood out about him, bringing him onto the team, and what are your expectations for his year with your program?
Yeah, so I think the first thing with Mitchell is, you know, it was pretty cool. I met the American Football Coaches Association, and I think I was standing there in the lobby with Taylor Stubblefield, and this guy comes up to us, and it's Mitchell Tinsley's coach from Western Kentucky. And he could not have gone on and on and on about more positive things about that young man. And as you know, when guys transfer, that's not always the case. And, you know, this guy just could not have been more positive. You know, he had decided he was going into the transfer portal. They had asked him to play in the bowl game anyway. He played in the bowl game, you know, obviously had a big year. And that's what we've seen since we, you know, have gotten him on campus. You know, the strength staff has been really impressed by him, Sean Clifford, who I think is his roommate, has been really impressed with him. I think we've done a really good job of these guys in the transfer portal, not just checking out their film, but doing extensive background checks and calling around all the way back to high school coaches and college coaches to make sure we understand what we're getting. It's amazing how often that's not happening. You know, guys that are getting signed by other schools and no one's ever called and checked on them at the previous institution, which is concerning to me. But, you know, obviously that gives us a veteran guy with Jahan leaving. Jahan obviously was extremely productive. Mitchell was very, very productive as well. Gives us an older guy. We think we got some really talented young receivers as well. But this gives us an older veteran presence who's had a lot of production in that room. So I think there's going to be a lot of value for both parties there, you know. And then when it comes to Vega, you know, just really pretty cool. You know, Stacy Collins has got history, you know, obviously in that part of that country, specifically recruiting, has got some relationships out there. So I think that played a part in this. Taylor Stubblefield is also from the state of Washington. My wife is from the state of Washington, coached out there. You know, so we were able to reach out and connect, and there was interest. I think early on it may have just been a trip, you know, but there was some interest. Came out on the trip, really liked our guys. Our guys do a great job when these guys come on campus of kind of getting a feel for our culture and, you know, kind of see how we interact with each other and really telling them the truth, which I think is really important. It typically, you know, recruiting is usually sealed by the players and how they make the recruits feel when they're on campus. You know, obviously, you know, Coach Troutwine did a good job going out there as well and connecting with this young man and his family. I was shocked. You know, a lot of times you see guys on film and you're not really sure what they're going to look like in person. And he showed up here and he was 336 pounds and carried it as well as anybody I've ever seen. Probably looked like he was 295. And you look at his athleticism on tape and his how quick his feet were and how light he was on his feet. You know, just really impressed. I also love the fact that he comes from a winning program. I think that was a big deal as well. And then just the more I find out about this guy, the more I like. Stacy, I don't know if you're able to unmute, but Stacy, you know, brought up this morning that I think he's student body president as well. Is that right, Stacy? I can't hear Stacy, Chris. So Stacy unmuted, but something was going on there. Stacy? No, it's not working.
We're having a issue apparently with Stacy.
Okay, we may have to change computers there. But just the more I find out about him, the more I like him. Again, the mom came out on the trip, the brother came out on the trip, the sister came out on the trip. That was awesome. I'm gonna make a trip and fly out there on a Sunday and spend the afternoon with their family and high school coach as well. I think that's important. But I just think he felt like a fit. You know, the last time we did this, it worked out pretty well with Koa Farmer. Went all the way out to California. I remember when Koa came on his trip, they landed in Philadelphia. It was a snowstorm. They got stuck and had to drive from Philly up to State College through the snow. And I'm like, there's no way in heck we're getting this kid. And it worked out well. So as you guys know, we'd like to recruit a little bit more nationally. And getting a guy like Vega to come in here, hopefully that will help. He'll come here and have a great experience and hopefully be able to go back and get a few more guys. So, you know, we're really excited about him at a position of need.